Well, like I like to say every Sunday morning, for those of you who are visiting, this is our standard after the worship, is open your Bibles, please. We're in a book called Daniel. It's a prophetic book in the Old Testament. Some of you probably know this book because there's a story about a fiery furnace and a lion's den, right? And that's what people teach the kids in the Sunday school, just to scare them, right? But they're amazing stories. They really are. They're true. But there's a lot more to it, as we've been learning as a church. So we began 3 weeks ago. This is our third week. We looked at chapter 1 first in two parts over the last 2 weeks. We're now in chapter 2, and some of you who are here this morning who are rocksters, that's our nickname, by the way, you will know that this chapter is 49 verses. So some of you are wondering, are we going to be here for 2 hours? Maybe. No. So how do you do it? How do you cover it? Well, number one, I'm not going to read the whole text, which we normally would do, and then we would unpack it verse by verse. But instead, we're going to take it in passages. I'll tell the story. We'll come to the most important verses, because this is a remarkable, remarkable passage. And so for this message today, I have a sermon title for you and 4 points, which again doesn't mean it's going to be 2 hours. I'm going to do my best here, okay? I think you're going to find it interesting. The title is The Giver of Visions and Dreams. Guess who that is? And from this text, I think you're going to see 4 things, 3 in particular. Everyone has fears. Amen? Anybody afraid of anything today? Number 2, human idols, which are not just those things, those statues and stuff. They're things that we put in the place of God in our lives, can't help you. Thirdly, there is a God who speaks. And lastly, 3 clues in the story, in the text, so wait for it, because that'll be at the end. A couple of things to start. This book is written 2,500 years ago. So sometimes people at the Rock, they know I'll open it up and go like this, right? Because it's old, right? And many of us today, us moderns, we look at a story like this and go, really? It has relevance for our day today? Well, it surely does. Because it's actually about today. It's about all of the days since Daniel wrote this book until today and until a very important day to come called the second coming of Jesus. It's in this book. It's foretold in this book. Here's the other thing we need to know. Both religious and secular theologians and scholars agree that the things written in this book are true. So it's not a myth. It's not just a storybook. It's true. It's dated. It starts in the first verse of the first chapter. In 605 BC, Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem, Judah. Look it up. It's a fact. And that's what Daniel does. He applies literally historical evidence on purpose. Now, he's writing this when he's about 80, 85 years of age, because it's at the end of his life in Babylon. But he went to Babylon when he was 17 years old. And so here's the deal. Daniel and his friends were taken into exile out of their noble and royal homes in Jerusalem, in the city of Jerusalem. The siege was taken by Nebuchadnezzar. He took people, but especially all of their young boys, to exile in Babylon. And we learned over the last few weeks that they were taken from their families. They were made eunuchs. This is a PG-13 audience, right? I don't really have to tell you what that means, do I? Pretty significant as a 17-year-old boy, and he was, and they were. They were enrolled in the University of Babylon, which again, historically, if you look into it, is one of the first instances in all of history of a university with the courses and the kind of outcomes that you would expect from Oxford, Cambridge, Ivy League to this day. It's where it actually started and was initiated by this guy who was a terrible despot, a sadistic man, but also brilliant. And so we learned from that the whole point was this. His plan was to assimilate them, any other nation that he besieged, and he besieged them all. And at the time of the beginning of the writing of chapter 2, or the story of chapter 2, he's only 30 years old. But in that time, he's basically the ruler of the world. The Babylonian Empire under him was huge. It was the main deal at that time. Everyone had fallen under it. But his process was, we need to assimilate you into our language, into our ideas, into our culture. That doesn't happen today, does it? Okay, that wasn't sarcastic. It's an honest question. It's 2,500 years ago. That's one of the ways it's so relevant today. The boys, despite all that, never complained about anything, and they gave in to the assimilation, including their godly names that they were given, and changed to the names of their gods, small g. They didn't balk at that, but Daniel balked at one thing, that they were to eat the king's food during their 3 years in university, Michelin star food, French Bordeaux wines, okay, not French yet, but really good wines. They balked at that. They said, no, that's the line in the sand. Because if we, especially meat that's sacrificed to idols, do that, we're going to defile ourselves before God. Nebuchadnezzar gave in, or at least his chief of the eunuchs gave in and let them eat the vegetables, and it turned out God gave them favor because of that, and Nebuchadnezzar found them to be the smartest and wisest after 3 years in Babylon's university of all of the kids that went to university. We arrive at chapter 2, verse 1, and point number 1. Everyone has fears. In the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His spirit was troubled and his sleep left him. Now, for us to get to the point of this whole passage, I need to point out a couple of things. Based on my life as in business and in marketing and in philosophy and studies over the years, and as a pastor, I've come to the conclusion that there's basically 3 types of people in the world when it comes to faith, and possibly potentially in this room today or watching online. Good morning, by the way. And that is, first of all, there are some people, and by the way, all of us have faith in a certain worldview. All of us are living out the faith of the worldview that we believe in today. Otherwise, getting out of bed in the morning would be a little difficult. So we have faith in some understanding of the world that's out there. Some place their faith in solely the material, in the science of mere facts, of human observation. They believe that that is all there is. No God, no heaven, no life after death. Imagine! Oh, wait a second, there was a song written about that. There are also many who believe in the unseen. They believe in the unseen, metaphysical, that there's a spirit world out there. They believe in it, but they can't define it. They're called agnostics. They're like, well, I have a hope there is, but the bottom of the line is I don't see any way that we can prove that, so I don't know that we can know for sure. Finally, there are those who truly believe in a creator God who has and continues, listen, to make himself known. Francis Schaeffer, one of the greatest apologists of the past maybe 100 years, he created a school over in Switzerland called L'Abri. There's many of them all over the world. He wrote a book, He is There and He is Not Silent. Recommend it highly. If you have any questions about whether there really is a God, it's brilliant. Wrote it in 1978, and again, 2024, it is so accurate to where we are today in our world. So Daniel ultimately is the story of the God who is above all gods and how and why he reveals himself to his creation. That's the story of the Bible. The story of the Bible, written from Genesis to Revelation, is God speaking to say, here I am. That's what it is in essence. It's God's word to say, hey, this is who I am. By the way, out of that, this is who you are. And that's why we study it, because it's actually amazing. It's the story also, in Daniel anyway, of 2 men. One who has, up until this point in time in history, in the second year of his reign, believed in a higher power to a certain extent, and a young man versus a young man with unwavering faith in one God who, listen, orchestrates everything, including dreams. That's incredible. So as I've said, Nebuchadnezzar is approximately 30 years of age at this time. He's already built the kingdom of Babylon into a dominant force. And so first of all, look at this. Is that verse still on screen? Lydia, can we have it back it up? Let's leave it on screen for a minute. Yes, there it is. No, not that one. The first verse, please. We're going to get there. Yes, there we are. So first, like all of us, he had dreams. Anybody have dreams? I had like 3 last night. I don't know about you guys, but like one was good. The other 2 were like, what? He had dreams. And listen, in our psycho-babble, I love this. Babel, do you know where that word came from? Babylon, the Tower of Babel. That's another Bible story. We don't have time this morning. We've relegated in our culture today dreams, I would suggest to you, to merely figments of our imagination when our brain synapses are kind of firing off and they're just kind of meaningless. Now, there are some people who try to interpret your dreams for you. And anyway, we'll get to those charlatans later. But anyway, there's that belief. But that's not true, actually. And definitely not in the view of the ancients. Before Christ, and even in the days of Christ, people thought dreams were quite significant. Nebuchadnezzar certainly thought they were very significant. That's why he had his cadre of soothsayers, magicians, enchanters, and the Chaldeans. That's why he had these guys. It's like political advisors today, right? They have them, right? We all do. So secondly, and equally important, listen, everyone has fears. We need to see this. Do you think Vladimir Putin has dreams? Do you think he doesn't sleep with one eye open? If I was him, I would. A pistol nearby? They all do. And quite frankly, sometimes based on their dreams, it's why they act out in ways that we all kind of go, what? What are you doing? Are you leading out of wisdom or out of fear? And so everybody has that. So as soon as he's awake, this is what we're going to see in this text if you read the whole story. As soon as he's awake, Nebuchadnezzar that is, he realizes that there's a problem here. He sends out a command to call all of his enchanters and soothsayers and Chaldeans to him. And it's really early in the morning because they all walk in and go, oh my goodness, something must be wrong, right? Because they're called in often by him for his advice, and oftentimes it's because of his bad dreams. And so he sends out this guy. If you carefully read the text, you're going to notice that he puts it to them this way. Guys, I've had a dream. And it's not in the, like another dream. It's like, no, I've had a dream. A significant dream. And the troubling thing is this. He could not actually remember the dream. Now, some of you have read your Bible stories before. You're kind of looking at me going, hang on, Glenn, what are you talking about? Well, because see, it's this. The way I've always heard this story taught is that this is such a really good example, really, it is, of Nebuchadnezzar calling out at the end going, I'm fed up with you guys. I don't think I trust you anymore. And so I'll tell you what, you're going to have to tell me what the dream is before you just give me the so-called interpretation. But no, actually, if you read the text carefully, it's pretty clear. He doesn't know the dream. Now, has that ever happened to you? Where you wake up the next morning, you've had a dream, particularly a dream that kind of frightens you or is weird, and you go downstairs, tell your mom, your dad, your wife, your husband, or whatever, you go, I had this dream last night. And they go, yeah, well, what was it about? And you go, right? Sometimes it's hard to remember those dreams. They little snippets, whatever. But so this is not unusual, but in this case, it was important that we understand he did not know the dream. And so the guys, the charlatans, they all show up before him, and they're going, King, listen, here's the drill. You know how it works. We come in, you tell us the dream, right? And we have a little bit of look at, all of the things that, like the tea leaves, the bones, the stars or whatever, and then we interpret your dream. It's the way it's always been done. They remind him of that a couple of times. This is the way it's done. Let's do it that way, right? Here's the interesting thing that I have found, and especially if you read history, the interpretation almost always was to the king's pleasure. You don't want to rile the king when he wakes up from a bad dream, do you? In that court, as we're going to see, it would mean off with your head. So that was the pattern, right? Nebi, my affectionate name for Nebuchadnezzar, would have nothing of that. Look what he says in verse 5. The word from me is firm, guys. If you do not make known to me the dream, I don't know the dream, and its interpretation, you shall be torn from limb to limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins. I assure you at this point in time, even before coffee, they're fully awake. You think? This has never happened before. It's frightening. He's a shrewd guy, so he decides to add a bit of a carrot to his stick. In verse 6, he says, but if you show the dream and its interpretation, you will receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. You're going to be rich. You just got to make this happen. So now they know they're in real trouble. Why? Because they're charlatans. They've been exposed. And so they appeal one more time. Nebi responds, telling them that they're just stalling and that he now suspects they've been lying to him all along. So yes, that first point that people believe from the story is true. They've been lying to him, and likely due to fear. And so they respond, and this takes us to point number 2. See, we're getting there. It's not 2 hours yet. Number 2, human idols cannot help you. They say this to the king, which is remarkable. There is not a man on earth who can meet the king's demand. For no great and powerful king has asked such a thing of any magician, enchanter, or Chaldean, right? You've never done this to us before. What are you doing? The thing that the king asks is difficult. Really. And no one can show it to the king, listen, except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. That's an interesting admission. So my question for you today is, don't you just wish that all of the soothsayers, tarot card readers, astrologers, and charlatans today would just be that honest? Don't you wish that? I do. I'm weird. I'm a pastor. I understand. So we've seen this already in Daniel. This true story is about the one true God. It's about the one true God revealing himself to Daniel, as he's done to the people of Israel. And now he wants to take it into the pagan world and into the kingship of Nebuchadnezzar. That's pretty remarkable. It's about Jesus, actually, the whole book is, and the future of the world, including the second coming of Christ, as we saw a little bit last week, as we'll see again when we get to chapters 7, 8, and 9, where the story from today really gets explained more deeply. It's shocking, actually. It's about this at the end of the day. It's about a word. It's called revelation. Again, it's a word in our modern culture, thanks to the Enlightenment and rabid atheists who will say that there's no God outside of humanity who's speaking to us, who's revealing himself to us. Haven't read the Bible. Well, what they've done is discounted the Bible. Daniel makes it very clear, as we'll see, that that's not the case. But more on that later. In Daniel verse 12, we see this. Because of this, the king was angry and very furious, and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. The end. Let's pray. Sorry. No. That is serious, right? Now, he declared that in their presence, and they're like, ooh. So Arioch, as we read as you go further in the chapter, the captain of the king's guard was then sent out to round up all of the charlatans, right? All of the wise men, Daniel and his friends included, and to kill them. This is the despot, the sadistic leader, Nebuchadnezzar, who God gave a dream to. What does that mean? Well, it kind of suggests that God's trying to reach him too, doesn't it? We will see that. I would suggest that's the case. Arioch then, as we continue to read, knocks on Daniel's front door, and like he did when he was asked to be allowed to abstain from the food when they ate meals during the night, Daniel, it says in the text, replied with prudence and discretion. Okay. We just heard a testimony by a 15-year-old young man. I'm not going to call you a boy anymore, buddy, okay? Young man. Daniel's now about 20 years of age, having gone through university for 3 years. But seriously, at 20, I don't remember having prudence. Anybody? Discretion? Daniel asks an important question. It's not going to be on screen. Why is the decree of the king so urgent in verse 15? What a good question, right? It's a great question. In other words, can you give us some time? Thinking on his feet. Like, again, fear of death is right in front of him. So in other words, he's asking, can you give us some more time? Arioch tells him essentially what's happened. And so like, listen, Daniel, you got to understand, I've been sent out like the king. Like, if I don't do what the king tells me, what? That's what he tells to him, basically. He tells him the whole story. And then what Daniel does is, again, he says to Arioch, listen, take me to the king and let me request to the king to have a little bit more time. Right? And he does that. He actually goes to the king, to Nebuchadnezzar. And this is, again, read history. Nebuchadnezzar is said to have in his great kingly state room, he is said to have a huge throne. And on either side of the throne, on the pillars beside his throne, there was a chain that went down to the neck of 2 animals. Guess what they were? Lions. It's historical. Now, you're 20 years old, and you're coming in, you've been sentenced to death, and you're coming in going, I don't know about you, but I'm like, I think my knees are hitting each other. So again, he asks the king to actually appoint a time when he can come back and tell the king the dream. Actually, no, he just says the interpretation. So again, can you believe this confidence? Where do you get that kind of confidence? There's only one source for that kind of confidence. We then read in verses 17 and 18, then Daniel went to his house, it'll be on screen, and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, using in the text their Jewish names. I love that. And he told them, listen, look at this, to seek mercy from God of heaven concerning this mystery. So Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Daniel does what even I and many mature Christians don't do when they're under fire like that. He calls a prayer meeting. He's 20 years old. He needs to hear from God. Doesn't try in his own mind to figure out what I'm going to go in and tell him a story. I'll make it up as I go along. He knows that's not going to, he needs to hear from God. So they held a prayer meeting, and guess what happened? Verse 19, then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. Daniel then does, we don't have time to read it this morning, verses 20 to 23, he then does what, again, a lot of mature Christians don't do when a really important prayer is answered for them. He blesses God. He gives thanks to God. For 4 verses, it's an incredible prayer. Go home and read it today, verses 20 to 23. Read it today. Read it this week. Every time God answers a small prayer, bless him the way Daniel blessed him. I would encourage you to do that. Point number 3. I told you, we're moving along. There is a God who speaks. Well, we're already beginning to see that. But in verse 24, it says this, therefore, Daniel went into Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus to the king, do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show the king what? The interpretation. Again, the dream's not mentioned, but it's about the interpretation. But you also see the highlighted words? The words wise men. So think about this. Do you think Daniel knew that these wise men were charlatans and purveyors of false gods and, quite frankly, evil witchcraft? Of course he did. So question, why didn't he say to Arioch, listen, Arioch, you know the same is true. So listen, why don't you do this? We'll wait. You go lop off all their heads. You kill all those guys, these charlatans. Then you come back and take me before the king. He doesn't do that. That's a great lesson to some of us who are Christians in this world today who love to go online or whatever and just fight with people who don't believe or agree with us, right? It's not what he does. It's a fantastic and, quite frankly, I believe, beautiful lesson. What he's about to do, listen, this is important for our clue coming up. He's actually proposing to save them too. I think that's absolutely beautiful. So dutifully, Arioch brings Daniel in to see Nebuchadnezzar, and honestly, it's one of those points in time in Scripture in the Bible, oftentimes, because I got a crazy sense of humor, but I just laugh. When I'm reading it, I'm kind of, Arioch walks in before the king and goes, great king. I'm not worried about the lions right now. He goes, hey, look at me. I found somebody for you. He did not, but he's kind of taking credit for it, right? I have found this guy. But he too, in his text, in his saying of that, only speaks about the interpretation. Nebuchadnezzar then looks at this young man, looks at Daniel, asks almost rhetorically, do you actually think you can tell me the dream? Nebi knows what he's doing. He really does know what he's doing. Daniel's answer is both humble and instructive. He repeats what had already been said by the charlatans. No wise man, he says to Nebuchadnezzar, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show the king the mystery that the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. and he has made known to the king, made known to you, Nebuchadnezzar, what will be in the latter days. Anytime you see the latter days in the Old Testament or the New Testament, it means the end. The times until the end, because there is an end coming. Some of us who are Christians are going, please, Lord Jesus, yes. Others are going, no. Things are okay. Really not, but we don't want it to end. We want to have hope, and we should. There is hope. So it's really amazing what we see here. Daniel includes himself as one of the wise men, affirming that all of their gods and man-made false gods are what they are. Instead, Daniel declares that, listen, he knows personally the God who reveals mysteries. And Nebi, he says to him, Nebi, the good news for you is, buddy, he chose to reveal himself to you. Even you, Vladimir. That's actually our God. So the first thing he does in the scripture, if you begin to, as he unpacks the dream, is he describes what actually Nebuchadnezzar saw but forgot, or whatever, what frightened him. A large, bright, frightening statue. A huge statue. It's the image of a man describing how, and he actually describes how Nebuchadnezzar remembered this because he was lying in his bed. He even says that, right? He describes it as being made in a sequence of different substances. It had a head of gold, very valuable, chest and arms of silver, middle and thighs of bronze, legs of iron. All of that was bizarre enough, but then when it got to the feet, it seemed very strange. They didn't fit the rest of the body. And the reason why it didn't fit the rest of the body was because they were made of a composite of iron and clay. Now listen, every time a dream was interpreted for Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar would have always thought that this dream is about me. A little narcissistic, but anyway, like it's about me and about my kingdom and how great it's going to be. And so that probably would have caused him to worry, because feet that are mixed with iron and clay don't seem very stable, do they? No, they're not. He's right. So if all of this wasn't terrifying enough, here's what also happens at that point. A stone breaks off from a mountain and crashes down, listen, this is important, onto the feet of the statue. Not the head, the feet of the statue. What do you think happens? The whole statue just goes like the Twin Towers. Shoo! The only thing that's left is dust. But this is not the end of it. Nebuchadnezzar then watches the stone. It's still there. It begins to expand into a mountain that seems to engulf the whole earth. You can also imagine at this point in time, Nebuchadnezzar's, this is when he wakes up in a cold sweat and goes, what in the world was that? I want to forget that. So now we can also understand why the vision, I would suggest, frightened him, but also maybe why he wasn't willing to tell the dream first, even if he did know parts of it. Why? Well, if he were to tell his enchanters and all the rest of the people in his court that there's coming a point in time where my rule is going to end, some of them are going, yeah, sooner than later, let's see what we can do about that. A wise king would never do that. So when he looks at these feet, he thinks, that doesn't look very stable, and he's absolutely right. And so he watches this, and at the end of the day, come on, he must have had a lot of questions. I'm sure he did. Questions like, what was the different metals? What was that all about, right? And why the mixed up feet? Was his kingdom unstable in some ways that he didn't know about? And then there was the stone. What threat did that represent? So despite all that, Nebuchadnezzar did know this. And this was also probably frightening for him. Standing right in front of him is a not 15-year-old, but not far off, a 20-year-old young man who knew the dream. Therefore, he's got to know the interpretation. Daniel steps up in verses 38 and 38 and says this, "You, O king, the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom," hint, hint, nudge, nudge, Nebi, right? "The power and the might, the glory, and into whose hand he has given, wherever they dwell, the children of man, the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, making you rule over them. You are the head of gold." Nebi's definitely going, end of the sermon, this is awesome, let's go home. So Daniel's first words probably would have caused Nebuchadnezzar to take a step back. This message was definitely for him and from this God outside of human flesh, which is the stone. But wait, he's thinking, a head of gold. Well, that's a good sign, right? That's really good. The answer is yes. Nebi, it's good. You are the head of gold. It's good. And as we will see from Daniel's next words about the next kingdom that follows, it's everything that follows him, every kingdom, every mineral that follows after him is less than the gold, right? So he's the most significant person or kingdom as part of the statue. And so what then were these future empires, do you think? Well, we're sitting 2,000 years on this side of the cross, as I like to say, but that puts us 2,500 years past these stories, these prophecies by Daniel from God. And so we know from history that from head to foot, the gold and from every other metal represent these kingdoms. Babylon, Medo-Persia, that followed. Daniel lived through Babylon and Medo-Persian. After that came what? History students? Greece, Alexander the Great, and the Roman Empire. 4 so far. And so we would know that. So ultimately, this vision or dream was dealing with time, with future events. History informs us that the Babylonian Empire lasted roughly 70 years. Not that long, but 70 years, right? Followed by the Medo-Persian Empire that lasted roughly 200. The Greek Empire took power for another 130 years before Rome comes to rule. It's interesting to note that the transition from the Greek to the Roman Empire corresponds with the shift between what ages? What ages would that be, guys? The Bronze Age to the what age? The Iron Age. It's historical. It's all part of our history. The Roman Empire lasts the longest in various forms until about AD 476. The Eastern Romans continued until the fall of Constantinople, easy for me to say, in 1453. Even today, in modern North America, in the world, we see the vestiges of the Roman Empire in what? Well, in the Latin language. I went to a Catholic boys' school for 5 years, St. Jean-Brebeuf School in Toronto, and we had to learn Latin. Porcus aum. It's one of the only things I remember. That's pig. You know, like male, female, and neuter declensions. There you go. I passed the test. But it's still with us. In all medical jargon is in Latin. It's written in Latin, right? And there's so many other ways. But also this, hear this. I've been telling the folks at the Rock Church for the last 2 weeks, the Babylonian worldview and empire is alive and well to this day. In our culture, and our same idea of assimilation into the culture, follow and be conformed to the pattern of this world. We're all being told that. It's alive and well. So the key to the image of this great man that Nebuchadnezzar saw was his feet of clay. Nebi probably knew it symbolized instability, which is exactly eventually what brought the Roman Empire down. It was divided and polarized, and it's what brings every empire down, right? Is division and instability. It can happen to any nation in the world, we might want to tell ourselves, or those of us south of the border, or those in Europe. It could happen anywhere, right? But there's one more kingdom in this story. There's one more. Verses 44 and 45, it says this, and in the days of those kings, what kings? The kings of Rome, the many Caesars that came, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end. It shall stand, how long? Forever. Goes on to say, just as he saw that stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, a great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. Then he says these very important words. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. Yeah. God has made known to Nebuchadnezzar and to Daniel and to you and I here today that not from human hands, there's going to be a stone that's going to crush all of these nations. And then that stone is going to grow into a mighty, mighty kingdom that will engulf all of humanity and the world. It's one of the three clues that we're going to see in just a second. Then we read, Nebuchadnezzar falls on his face in front of Daniel, paying homage to Daniel. Amazing. And then he says this, truly your God is God of gods, Lord of kings, and a revealer of ministries. For you have been able to reveal this mystery. Then the king gave Daniel, look at this, high honors. Promised the rewards, right? The carrot. High honors and many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief prefect. Look at this. Important. When we get to the clues, we're getting there. All the wise men of Babylon. It concludes with Daniel, now clearly in charge, asking that he also appoint his buddies over the provinces with him. But he's over the wise men. Three clues. The first is this. Since the Enlightenment, and certainly with the advent of the radical new atheists of today, the book of Daniel is a huge problem. It's a huge problem. Any apologist, John Lennox, who I've mentioned to many of you before, watch him online on YouTube, John Lennox debating Dawkins, Hitchens, whatever. It's incredible how this book is a problem for them. It tells before the events happen what's going to happen, and we know now from history they happened. Everything, including the birth of Jesus Christ, which is detailed in this book, happened. What does that mean about his second coming, do you think? So they have a problem with it. So what do? Well, it's like, it couldn't have been written before Daniel died. That's their conclusion, right? So listen, besides being ridiculous, there's a problem. Here's the first problem and clue. Read history. There's no Jewish author, there's no Babylonian author, no secular author who during the time since Daniel wrote it, and they all knew he was there, not one has ever come out and written anything and said, yeah, you know what? And this is before the birth of Christ, I want to say. That didn't happen. The way he put it didn't actually happen. He didn't really mention those things before they happened. Nobody. Not a single word. That's clue number one. Clue number two is the stone. If you haven't put it together yet, let me put it to you this way. Over 120 years before Nebuchadnezzar's dream and 725 years before the birth of Jesus, the prophet Isaiah wrote this. It'll be on screen. Behold, I am laying in Zion, Israel, a stone, a cornerstone, chosen and precious. Whoever believes in him will not be put to shame. In Luke, in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 20, verses 17 and 18, Jesus, speaking of himself, references Isaiah when he says, what then is this that is written? The stone that the builders rejected, the builders, the people of Israel, the rulers of Israel, did they reject Jesus? Oh yeah, they did. Has become the cornerstone. Everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces, and when it falls on anyone, it will crush him. The point? The dream that God gave to Nebuchadnezzar was for him. And 2,500 years later, it's for every one of us in this room. It's for us. So first, as the stone from outside of man, that stone would cause all the kingdoms of this world to come crashing down. And please see this. Slowly but surely, that stone would grow into a mountain, a kingdom that encloses the whole earth. What is that called today in this age? Friends, it's called the church of Jesus Christ. He's coming again. There's one last clue, and we'll conclude. I'm not sure if you caught it, but in verse 12, for some reason, well, I know why, Daniel, all of a sudden, rather than calling them soothsayers, enchanters, and whatever, he lumps them all into two words. Remember to see that? Wise men. Now, and he does it 7 more times throughout the book. He continues to do it throughout the book. He calls them the wise men, right? And some would say, well, just for brevity, he's a good author, he's a good writer. He's just, he's just bringing them all into one just for brevity, so we all understand what he's talking about now. So that's all he's doing. He's doing it for that reason. But also this, can I just remind you of this? He saved their lives, didn't he? And for the next 50, 60, maybe 70 years, he's over them. Do you think for a second he's teaching them at all about the God of Israel? The God. Trying to make them really wise men. Well, do you remember this at the birth of Jesus, 500 years later? Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men, it's 500 years later, from the east came to Jerusalem saying, where is he who has been born king of the Jews? For we saw his star. Still astrologers, that's okay. Maybe astronomers now. When it rose and have come to worship him. So isn't it amazing? I always wondered, you do the birth of Jesus at Christmas time at an Advent series, and you do that little story of the three wise men. It's so cute. It's wonderful, right? And some people, even, of course, the great atheists of our world, they go, well, there you go. That just proves it's myth. It's just a silly little story just put in there. It doesn't really have, whatever. Three wise men, right? Verses 10 and 11 in Matthew say this, when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joys, and going to the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshiped, a baby? They worshiped Jesus as king in the manger, in the home. Then, opening their treasures, they offered their gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. It would appear all along, friends, that they, probably from their ancestors that got passed down to them, believed the prophecies of Daniel. And they were on watch. They were truly wise men. It's interesting, when they first met with Herod, he says to them, because he was really worried about his kingdom and he'd heard about this new king, and so he wanted to put this new king to death if he could find him. And he says to the wise men, he says, listen, by the way, maybe you can help me out, right? Maybe you can help me out. When you find him, come back and tell me, because I want to come and worship him too. Right. Verse 12 of Matthew says this. Look, and being warned in a what? Warned in a dream. Not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. Friends, it's true. This is all true. The God of heaven is the revealer of mysteries, and he speaks to us through dreams and visions. To this day, he does. As well as he has chosen to speak to pagan kings. He does. That's why we pray for them. So the only question that remains today is this. Will you all believe? Will you all believe? Will you believe that Jesus is the stone and that his church is his building? And it's what he is building. He said, I will build my church in Matthew 16:18, where we get the name of our church, the Rock. What is that? It's a stone. Will you believe in him? Will you believe that he's building his church into a great mountain that will one day be the kingdom that lives and reigns forever and ever and ever? Will you be part of that? Friends, listen, I have to encourage you by these final words. He will. He will return again. He will accomplish what he has said he would do. Why do I say that? Well, as Daniel declares, it's a sure thing. Pray with me, would you?